Hi, it's Miss Fusaro, and I'm here to talk to you about the Fairy Tale Creative Writing Assessment. So, this assessment is what you're going to work on throughout the Fairy Tale Creative Writing unit. You will have time after that unit is completed also to submit the final assessment as well as put this into your portfolio. So, don't worry about that. So, what's the purpose of this? As a study of comparative literature across cultures, students will read, understand, and analyze different versions of the Cinderella tale that you read for summer reading to gain a socio-political consciousness of the influence of fairy tales. Students will write their own fairy tale. That's right, guys, you're going to write your own fairy tale to demonstrate your critical understanding of the literary, social, and cultural influence of these works to serve as your writing benchmark for the year. So I'm going to use this as the number one benchmark to see your different writing style, your different writing ability as that main benchmark. So I love this quote from Neil Gaiman about fairy tales, and I wanted it to kind of frame what the work means for me, and hopefully it gives you an idea of like what it could possibly mean for you. So Neil Gaiman says, Albert Einstein was asked once how we can make our children intelligent. His reply was both simple and wise. If you want your children to be intelligent, he said, read them fairy tales. If you want them to be more intelligent, read them more fairy tales. He understood the value of reading and of imagining. I hope we can give our children a world in which they will read and be read to and imagine and understand. And so I want you to be a part of that world by adding your own folklore, by adding your own fairy tale to this world. So, what's the task? What's the writing piece? You're going to write your own fairy tale using the skills we've acquired from the lessons in class. So that's really important. While this is being presented to you before the actual unit of study, the expectation is that as you're getting the different lessons in class about fairy tales and folklore, you're learning a little bit more and then you're applying that to your writing. So as you're learning, you're revising. As you're learning, you're revising. As you're learning, you're revising even further. So you should be learning through this project. It's not just a culminating piece. So you're going to write your fairy tale drawing from your own life and your own experience and using Maria Tatar's The Classic Fairy Tales as a mentor text. So you're going to bridge the worlds of academics, art, folklore, and invention. Your own writing piece should bear the following aspects. The main character should represent some aspect of your own identity. Now, whether that's something literal, whether that's figurative, whether that's pieces of you, whether it's pieces of who you want to be, who you were, that's completely interpretive and going to be up to you. But there should be a personal connection to that main character. The villain needs to be crystal clear. That's the rule for fairy tales. And that's going to be part of something we talk about later as far as accuracy. You need to maintain the rules of fairy tales and of the genre. Your villain has to be clear. Good versus evil is one of the most important aspects of fairy tales, one of the most important um, faces, villainy that your main character is going to have to face is that main villain. So again, how that villain may be interpreted, well, that's going to be your ingenuity, your creativity. So what that villain represents is going to be totally up to you. There should be the axis of transformation for that main character. You will have a lessons about the axis of transformation, but essentially it's your main character going through a development, a coming of age, an understanding of self as they get from the beginning to the end. And then you're going to consider a critical theory as a reverse lens. So if a student were to analyze your piece, what philosophical enlightenment would follow from that? So this is not something that you're writing for the critical theory, you're not analyzing the critical theory, but instead, is it possible that somebody else could read your work and see a critical theory coming through? Pro tip: when it comes to the depth and complexity of writing, it must include significance, consequence, and reason. So, significance is the thematic importance. Of course, your writing needs to have a theme. Even though the conflict, which what I was trying to say before, their conflict of good versus evil, is simple, the themes you could still elicit should be complex and full of depth, as we've seen from the different Cinderella stories. Consequence. The consequence was the effect, what's the result, what's the impact. and reasons author's purpose. So, what would be the purpose for this fairy tale? What could possibly be something that other people interpret when they're trying to figure out what you were thinking? So, significance, consequence, and reason. Now, if you might note on the right hand side over here, my friend Jackie Patanio wrote a comment about some of her ideas when I shared my concept with her. And I'm going to talk about that because I really like some of her ideas, but I'm going to talk about that after I go through the whole thing. So the assessment, everybody wants to know how are we being assessed? How are we assessing each other? So of course you have your power standards, which you can click through and see the power standards 5 and 6. Power standard 5 is writing fiction. So there's all the different standards that go with that. And power standard 6 is grammar and punctuation. So that's of course, main aspects. You're going to look at those. But here are some also the different pieces that I'm looking for and that you should be looking for in each other as far as assessment. The composition, okay? And this is like really a holistic way of looking at things. How the whole piece flows together to craft a full story with meaning. So this is really like this step back perspective. Like, how does this as a whole have meaning? Everything put together, that's composition. Accuracy, how you follow the rules of the genre. It must follow the rules of fairy tale. So that's something we're going to learn throughout the course of this first unit. What are the rules of the fairy tale genre? It has to follow those rules. Precision, how you maintain proper formatting, grammar, punctuation, and overall correct writing mechanics. Detail. A note on precision. Just because something is a fairy tale and may have a whimsical aspect to it, or it may even be directed towards children, does not mean that we eliminate the proper aspect of language. In fact, the simpler something is, the more precise and clear we need to be to ensure that our meaning is coming through. Details, how you utilize various techniques and particulars to contribute meaning. That could be a lot of things. Maybe you're describing your landscape or different colors or types of clothing. There are a million different ways that you can use details in order to add to that meaning. Artistry, how you use creativity. Now that seems really vague, and it is because there are so many different ways that you can get creative with your artistry. Are you using some type of personification? How, are you integrating magic? Are you integrating different linguistic aspects, let's say, to the magic? There's so many different ways that you can be creative in the fairy tale aspect. So that's why that's kind of vague, but there should be something. It shouldn't just be black and white. Ingenuity, how you are inventive, clever, and integrate your own fresh concepts. So what does that mean? It means you're not just taking a one of the versions of the Cinderella stories and giving it your own name. You're not taking a Disney movie and putting your own main character in it. No, you're coming up with your own storyline. Even though we have the same rules that we've seen before, such as the good versus evil, but you're coming up with your own characters, you're coming up with your own circumstances, your own landscapes, your own settings, your own themes, etc., etc. That's where ingenuity is really playing an important role, which is why I asked for you to draw on your own life experience and your own identity, because that's your story to tell, and it's going to be easier to have ingenuity and artistry when you're drawing from your own life. And finally, some of the mechanics here. Submission. So you're going to submit the first draft in our Google Drive folder. You could click through there. You're going to peer review each other's work using the standards, and a final submission will go to the originality checker in Google Classroom. Now you'll see I'll have brainstorming, peer conferences, first draft, final. These will be filled in with dates as we go through. We will work on these dates together. We'll figure it out together. So that's why they're blank right now. But don't worry, there will always be plenty of time to make sure that we have that. Now over here, I want to go back to what Jackie Patanio said because I really did like her concept. Like she wanted to think about what the follow through would look like. And what I'm going to ask is that over here she mentions, reflection of self, how you came to the conclusion of the main character, are the elements of the villain that are living in their own identity, shadow self. So I think this will be really important for you to do because you're going to be asked to have your fairy tale piece submitted in your first checkpoint for your portfolio. So I want you to look at her questions, and in your reflection for your first checkpoint of the portfolio, you're going to address some of her questions. So remember that. For checkpoint one of the portfolio, you're going to look back at your fairy tale piece and look at her questions and put that in the reflection for checkpoint one of the portfolio. Okay, if you have any questions, of course, don't hesitate to ask me, and I'll be happy to respond to them. Thank you so much.